So we grabbed our client ID from Google OAuth. Now let's implement authentication on the client by heading to first the splash page in the client folder and importing the login component. And this is going to come from the components folder within auth. So it'll be one level up /components /auth/login. And we're going to replace this starter div with login. Now to implement the login itself, we'll go to the login component within auth. And in order to help us with signing in our users, we're going to use a special React component from a library called React Google Login. So up at the top of login, we'll import Google Login from React Google Login. And it's going to automatically create for us a login button that we can just have our users click to sign them in. So we'll replace this login div with Google Login. And the first thing that we need to provide as a prop to Google Login is our client ID. So we'll create a client ID prop, copy our OAuth client ID from our .env file, and then paste that in. So what we should see, if we save splash.js and login.js, if we head to the login route, we should see a login, or rather sign in with Google button. And when our users click on it, they'll have a little pop-up window open up, which will allow them to choose their Google account and sign in. However, if they sign in successfully, nothing's going to happen. We haven't told the component what to do when there's a successful sign-in. And for that, we have another prop called onSuccess that we can attach to Google Login. OnSuccess accepts a function, which will give the same name, and we'll create this onSuccess function within our login component. So when the login is successful, we'll get access within this function to a Google user object. And for now, let's just console log Google user. So let's open up our console and sign in. And once we do so, the pop-up should close and we should get our Google user object. And this contains a bunch of information. As you see, there's this access token, Google ID, a bunch of profile information attached to the user's Google account. However, what's going to be important for us is if we take a look at this Z object, we have an ID token, this very long cryptic string. Instead of immediately grabbing all of this profile information, what we're going to do is we're going to send off this ID token to our backend. We'll send it on an authorization header. Our backend is going to verify this token. It'll get the Google user's profile information there. We'll ask for that information from the client, and we're going to do so with the me query that we set up. The user's information will be sent back to the client in response to this query, and the user will be logged in. So if that doesn't make too much sense now, it will in just a bit. Our first step is, now that we're able to successfully sign in, grab this ID token, which we'll eventually send to our backend to verify. So the easiest way to get this ID token, the most convenient way, is to take this Google user object that we're getting access to in onSuccess and execute a method on that object called getAuthResponse. And this method is going to return to us an object from which we can grab the ID underscore token property. So that'll give us our ID token, and we're going to put it in a variable called ID token. And then once again, I'm going to console log the ID token to make sure we're successfully getting that. Now notice that we just signed in, but if we refresh the page, nothing happens. Presumably we'd need to sign in again. We want our application to remember the sign in. We don't want to have to sign in between page refreshes. So in order to persist our sign in, we can head down to the Google Login component and add a prop called isSignedIn and set that to true. That's going to remember for us that we previously signed in, and it's going to automatically sign us in again. And if we take a look at our console, we should see return to us this very long ID token.